While boating on the lake, I accidentally fell into the water and was fortunately rescued by a down-and-out scholar. To protect my reputation, I generously rewarded him but did not reveal my identity. Yet, a noble from the palace suddenly appeared, with indignation written all over her face. She insisted that saving a life must be repaid with marriage. Not only did he publicly proclaim my identity, he even produced the imperial gold token, relying on the emperor's backing to force me into marrying a destitute scholar. Yet the scholar showed no ambition whatsoever. Not only did he indulge in drinking and revelry all day, contracting a venereal disease, but he also deliberately passed it on to me. Let me die in agony. Reborn in this life, I gaze at the emperor dressed in plain clothes not far away. At this moment, he is watching Song Qianghua buying rabbit lanterns by the shore, completely unaware of me. So, just before falling into the water, I decisively pulled him off the boat. In this way, in this life, my savior could only be the reigning emperor, and for the debt of saving my life, I must repay it with my own self. Hello, everyone, welcome to my channel. Subscribe us to read wonderful novels every day. Now the story begins. The last memory before death was me choking Lin Yunzhou's neck, questioning him why he treated me this way. He laughed maniacally. I have contracted a venereal disease and won't live much longer. But since husband and wife are one, naturally you must accompany me on the road to the underworld. So Lin Yunzhou knew full well that he had contracted a venereal disease, yet he deliberately drugged my calming soup to make me fall asleep. Then took the opportunity to pass the disease on to me. I hate to the point of vomiting blood, yet I know this illness has no cure, so I pull out the golden hairpin from my bun. Under his stunned gaze, I thrust it fiercely into his chest, staining his clothes crimson with blood. If we must die, you will die first, vicious woman. He spat out a mouthful of saliva, his hands gripping my neck with all his might, swearing to drag me down to hell with him. Neither of us let go. In a daze, my mind wandered back to that year's boating incident. If it weren't for Song Qianghua's obstinacy and the emperor's indulgence, I would never have married Lin Yunzhou. Ending up in such a miserable state today, it's just a pity that in this lifetime there's probably no chance for me to seek revenge for myself, but I truly cannot accept it. If there is a next life, I will make sure they all pay in blood for what they owe. The heavens truly heard my prayer. When I opened my eyes again, I found myself back in that early spring of the past, on the day I fell into the lake while boating. Miss, the wind on the boat is strong, be careful not to catch a chill. The maid Hongxiu, just as in my previous life, handed me the cloak in her hands and then stood obediently by my side. Seeing her again, I couldn't help but feel emotional. We grew up together since childhood, though nominally mistress and servant. In private we called each other sisters, and I treated her as my own younger sister, and she, too, genuinely cared for me. So in my past life, when Song Qianghua forced me to marry Lin Yunzhou, everyone was too intimidated by the golden token bestowed by the emperor in her hands to speak up for me. Only Hongxiu knelt and pleaded tearfully, just to beg Song Qianghua to spare me. But Song Qianghua, annoyed by her cries and emboldened by the emperor's backing, actually ordered her guards to publicly cut out Hongxiu's tongue. In the end, she bled to death, dying in my arms. I couldn't save her, nor could I save myself, and the one responsible for all this was Song Qianghua, who was currently buying a rabbit lantern from a vendor by the shore. Thoughts surged and receded like tides as I stared fixedly at Song Qianghua in the distance. Though she was the only woman by Gu Yuanqing's side, but she carried the bloodline of the previous dynasty, forever barred from being in theft as a consort, and could only follow Gu Yuanqing without name or status. This was the deepest pain in her heart. As the daughter of the Duke of Jinghua, I was the candidate for empress strongly recommended by the ministers. Thus, Song Qianghua harbored great resentment toward me. At last year's royal palace banquet, we met by chance. With a fierce look in her eyes, she pulled me into a secluded spot. She warned me, saying, "Shinmingxia, the position of empress is mine. Don't you dare dream of it." I paid no heed to her words, not only because of her special status, but also because I had no intention of entering the palace. Gu Yuanqing's heart belonged to her alone. Even if I enter the palace, I can't avoid the scheming and intrigue. It would be better to find a caring husband and live a peaceful life. Later, Song Qianghua somehow managed to pull off some unknown trick. The matter of establishing an empress was unexpectedly delayed, and to this day, the entire harem remains without a single concubine. This originally had nothing to do with me. Until the early spring of the third year of Qiyuan, I accidentally fell into the water and was rescued by a down-and-out scholar. Though I intended to reward him generously, to protect my reputation as a young lady, I had no plans to reveal my identity, yet, coincidentally, Song Qianghua and Gu Yuancheng were also out for an excursion that day. Gu Yuancheng, like me, had boarded the pleasure boat, while Song Qianghua was on the shore buying rabbit-shaped lanterns. Due to my fall into the water, the boat docked, upon hearing about the incident from others and realizing it was me who had been rescued. Song Qianghua immediately overturned the tray of gold ingots that Hongxiu was holding. She declared with absolute certainty, Xin Mingjia, saving a life demands repayment with one's own person. As the legitimate daughter of the Duke of Jin, how could you not understand this principle? She publicly announced my identity and then produced the imperial gold token bestowed by the emperor. It was a birthday gift from Gu Yuancheng to her. There was an intention to make amends. So besides infeffing her, presenting the imperial gold token meant that any wish of hers had to be fulfilled. This matter was known to all the commoners in the capital. So when she took out the imperial token and deliberately exposed Gu Yuancheng's identity, declaring that she would use the golden token to arrange a marriage, forcing me to wed that destitute scholar, the emperor's word is as good as gold, and with her public declaration, the matter had already spread like wildfire. This world has always been harsh on women, therefore, apart from being forced to marry Lin Yunzhou, my only options were to shave my head and become a nun or to die. Only then could I escape the imperial decree of marriage, but I didn't want to die. So marriage was the only choice. However, Lin Yunzhou was not a good man. Once we were married, he secretly embezzled my dowry money to indulge in pleasure-seeking and neglected his duties. I had intended to seek a divorce and return home, but this was an imperial marriage decree. Even if I were to die, I would have to bear my husband's surname and remain bound to the Lin family, and at the slightest displeasure, he would send letters to the palace, accusing me of lacking feminine virtue, failing to be considerate to my husband, and neglecting household duties. Song Qianghua would seize the opportunity to pressure me in the emperor's name. She would send palace messengers to deliver oral decrees, forcing me to copy the admonitions for women and rules for women over and over again. Thus, my reputation was utterly ruined, and I was forced to stay indoors copying books all day long. Lin Yunzhou took the opportunity to indulge in pleasure-seeking at brothels, even bringing a Yangzhou skinny horse home at one point, ultimately contracting a venereal disease. He then deliberately passed the disease to me, causing me to die in such a humiliating and disgraceful manner. So in this life, not only Lin Yunzhou, but also all those who have harmed me in the past, I will make them pay with their blood, just like in my previous life. The teacup in Hongxiu's hands was accidentally knocked over by someone. It stained the cloak I had just put on. She quickly removed it for me and then said softly, "Miss, I'll go to the guest room to fetch you a new cloak." With that, she turned and walked toward the cabin. This pleasure boat was crafted by a master artisan, large in size, exquisitely made, with several guest cabins for temporary rest. Every year, coming here to enjoy the lake during spring outings has become a regular tradition, but this time, I grabbed Hongxiu's arm, her steps faltered slightly, and when she turned to look at me, there was a hint of confusion in her eyes. "Is there anything else you need, miss?" I nodded and whispered a sentence into her ear. After all, we had grown up together. The tacit understanding between us was such that, even though she couldn't comprehend my next actions and her eyes held a trace of confusion, she still nodded without hesitation before quickly turning and walking back to the cabin. Seeing her leave, I turned back to gaze at the landscape of mountains, water, and lakes ahead. Just a fleeting glance out of the corner of my eye caught sight of Lin Yunzhou standing by the shore, dressed in scholarly attire. He held a volume of sage literature under a willow tree, looking every bit the refined scoundrel, yet, after the time it takes to drink a cup of tea, not a single page of the sage's book in his hands had been turned. His thoughts had long since wandered to who knows where. Suddenly, a very bad thought arose in my mind, and at that very moment, he slightly raised his eyes, meeting my gaze. In his eyes, there was greed. I turned again to look at Gu Yuancheng beside me. As the youngest emperor of the dynasty, although I had once been fortunate enough to enter the palace with my father, I had never truly seen the face of the sovereign, so in the previous life, even when he stood beside me, I didn't recognize him, and at this moment, his gaze remained fixed on Song Qianghua, leaving him completely off guard against me. So the next moment, when the ship suddenly lurched and an invisible force violently pushed me overboard, I decisively reached out and swiftly grabbed Gu Yuancheng's sleeve. He was caught off guard, and the suddenness of the incident caused him to be pulled into the water with me. At the same moment, I heard another distinct splash. It was Lin Yunzhou jumping into the lake to rescue me. but I was no longer the Shin Mingzhao of my past life, having suffered greatly from falling into water before. I had already learned how to swim in my previous life in this way. While pretending to panic and call for help, I tightly held on to Gu Yuancheng, subtly pulling both of us backward and creating a considerable distance between us and Lin Yunzhou. He was originally on the shore, and it would take some time for him to swim over to rescue me. That's why, in my previous life, I was already somewhat unconscious by the time I was saved, but this time was different. Gu Yuancheng could also swim, but I pretended to drag him down and repeatedly tormented him, causing him to choke on water several times, until I could feel the strength of his grip on my arm weaken compared to the initial force. I stopped struggling and let him lead me toward climbing onto the pleasure boat. The servants on the boat had already prepared everything, waiting only for Gu Yuancheng and me to approach before swiftly pulling us aboard. As soon as we boarded, Lin Yunzhou climbed up from the other side of the boat, his face dark with anger. I didn't give them a chance to speak. Hongxiu exchanged a glance with me, gave a slight nod, and then stepped forward to face the two men. Thank you, young master, for saving our young lady. And to you, sir, though we don't know why you also fell into the water, since your clothes are soaked. Why not go to the guest room to change into dry ones? The early spring chill is no joke, better take care not to catch a cold. Hongxiu's words were skillfully crafted. First, they ensured everyone believed it was Gu Yuancheng who had saved me. Second, they effectively dismissed any debt of gratitude owed to Lin Yunzhou, who had jumped in afterward in a failed attempt to rescue me. After all, it was Gu Yuancheng who saved me. As for him, from start to finish, he didn't even touch a single corner of my clothing and boarded the boat later than I did. Rather than saying he saved me, it would be more convincing to say he accidentally fell into the water. Lin Yunzhou's face darkened, and just as he was about to say something, my servant had already helped him into the guest room. Gu Yuancheng originally wanted to decline, but in the water's entanglement, he expended far more energy than I did, and I deliberately made him choke on water several times, leaving him somewhat dazed at this moment. Moreover, with so many eyes watching, he had saved my life. I had the servant take him to change clothes, and there was nothing inappropriate about it, so he ultimately nodded and entered the guest room. Seeing him leave, I finally let out a sigh of relief and then went into my own guest room to change clothes. By now, Song Qianghua on the shore had already heard the commotion. Holding her rabbit lantern, she stood by the shore and asked someone about the earlier commotion. With the morning's arrangements already made, by the time Lin Yunzhou and I had changed our clothes and stepped out, Gu Yuancheng was still waiting for his servant to fetch him clean garments and hadn't emerged yet. But as the boat was about to dock, just as in my past life, I publicly instructed Hongxiu to present my savior with 100 gold ingots. The gleaming gold ingots placed on the tray were dazzling to the eyes. I wore a veil, and as long as I didn't reveal my identity, no one would know who I was. Today's incident could have been easily dismissed like this. But Song Qianghua had seen me before, and even through the thin veil, she recognized me. She immediately lifted her skirt and rushed onto the boat. Shin Mingjia, this gentleman saved your life. How could you repay his kindness with mere worldly possessions? Song Qianghua spoke with absolute certainty, her demeanor impassioned and fervent, amid the earlier chaos. She hadn't witnessed the scene firsthand but had only heard others mention it, merely that a woman had fallen into the water and been rescued. Thinking to board the boat for some excitement, she happened to discover that the rescued person was me. Upon hearing that I intended to repay the kindness with gold, she immediately stepped forward. As the sole daughter of the Duke of Jinghua, Shin Mingzhao, you are a noble lady of the capital and should set an example. Since this gentleman saved you and had physical contact with you in the water, whether to repay the life-saving grace or to preserve a woman's dignity, once you've allowed another to touch you, you should marry him. These words were identical to those in my past life. Even her expression was just as self-righteous. After speaking, she walked up to Hongxiu and with a wave of her hand, scattered the tray of gold ingots, several of which fell into the water. Seeing this, many people on the shore immediately jumped in to retrieve them. In her past life, this same scene had occurred, people scrambling for the gold ingots that fell into the water, resulting in 3 casualties. Among them were a sickly young child and a 70-year-old elder. Fortunately, having been reborn, she had prepared in advance. One of the things she had instructed Hongxiu to do was to arrange for people to stand by the shore, ready to swiftly rescue those 3 individuals, amidst the farce. Song Qianghua clicked her tongue in disapproval and scolded me. Shin Mingzhao, look at the mess you've made, repaying kindness with such vulgar things as gold and silver, and you nearly got someone killed in the process. do you feel even a shred of guilt? She's always like this, capable of turning black into white, never admitting she could be in the wrong, yet, Gu Yuancheng adored this very trait of hers, finding her unique, and thus repeatedly indulged her. Which ultimately led to my tragedy. So, they are all culprits. I suppressed the emotions in my heart and, just like in my previous life, argued with her. Of course, a life-saving grace must be repaid. But it doesn't necessarily mean pledging oneself in marriage. Although gold and silver are vulgar things, this amount is enough to ensure his livelihood for the rest of his life. Ha, that's sophistry. Song Qianghua glanced at me sideways, then crossed her arms with an air of self-righteousness. A life-saving grace must be repaid with one's own body. I refused to back down. Why should I listen to you? She sneered, just as she had in her past life, swiftly taking the imperial-granted golden token from her waist. Then she raised her voice, Shen Mingzhao. As the daughter of the Duke of Jin, you should have some knowledge. Do you not know that the sight of this token is akin to seeing the emperor himself? The imperial token was held high in her hand, among the pleasure boats here. There were many young masters and ladies from noble families, so someone immediately exclaimed in surprise, "Oh my, isn't that the token bestowed by His Majesty? Is she Song Qianghua?" Rumors say His Majesty favors Lady Qianghua exclusively, refusing to take concubines or establish an empress. The moment the token appeared, the crowd immediately buzzed with discussion. Song Qianghua wore a smug expression as she thrust the token closer to me, then declared loudly, "Since you all know the authority of this imperial token, you should understand that my words carry the weight of His Majesty's decree." Shen Mingzhao, daughter of the Duke of Jin, accidentally fell into the lake while boating and was rescued by a stranger. Having had physical contact and owing him her life, she must marry him in gratitude. These words, in my past life, once became my worst nightmare, but this time I looked at Gu Yuancheng, who had just emerged from the cabin unaware of what was happening, and immediately declared loudly, "You claim to represent His Majesty. So where is His Majesty?" The moment the words fell, Song Qianghua's eyes lit up, and she pointed at Gu Yuancheng. "He's right there." Many young masters from noble families, though they had deliberately concealed their identities before, were now under the scrutiny of the crowd, and someone had already recognized Gu Yuancheng. Immediately, someone cried out, "Your Majesty!" Then, everyone on the pleasure boat knelt down in unison. Seeing this, Song Qianghua ran to his side again, took his hand, and said in a soft, coquettish tone, "Yuancheng, you once promised me that as long as I produced this imperial token, you would grant me anything I asked, didn't you?" "That's only natural." Gu Yuancheng nodded, his expression full of tenderness. I knelt on the ground, my face deathly pale, then looked up at Song Qianghua and Gu Yuancheng. My voice trembled as I asked, "Does Your Majesty truly consent to this marriage?" Although Gu Yuancheng didn't know what had happened, the sight of his beloved Song Qianghua acting coquettishly toward him, combined with Lin Yunzhou being deliberately pulled to kneel beside him by Heng Xiu after emerging, made it seem from Gu Yuancheng's perspective that Song Qianghua wanted me to marry Lin Yunzhou. He doesn't like me, and the person she loves despises me. So my very existence would naturally displease him. Marrying me off, not a good match, but it would please his beloved. Naturally, Gu Yuancheng wouldn't refuse, display imperial majesty, then publicly declare, "By bestowing this token, we represent our will. Since Qianghua has spoken and promised you in marriage, then regardless of who the other party is, you must marry. This too is our decree." "Good, very good. I've been waiting for these words. The emperor's word is as good as gold." His words left no room for maneuver under the watchful eyes of the crowd. Even if the groom was himself, many of those present were skilled in flattery and immediately crowded around me, offering congratulations with sycophantic looks in their eyes. This wasn't what Song Qianghua had expected, and her eyes were filled with confusion. After all, if I had been forced to marry a poor scholar, people would at most sigh for me, rather than flattering me endlessly as they do now. Wasn't it him who saved Shen Mingzhao? Hearing this, Gu Yuancheng's expression darkened slightly, as if somewhat conflicted. "Qianghua, whose marriage proposal did you agree to for her?" Song Qianghua blinked her eyes, still wearing that matter-of-fact expression. She declared loudly, "Naturally, it's the marriage contract with the person who saved her." Hearing this, Gu Yuancheng's pupils suddenly constricted. The next moment, someone in the crowd shouted, "Wasn't it His Majesty who saved Miss Shen?" At these words, Song Qianghua's expression instantly changed dramatically. She frantically looked towards Gu Yuancheng, only to see his face equally ashen. Song Qianghua kept shaking her head, pointing at Lin Yunzhou. "Wrong, wrong. Wasn't it him who saved Shen Mingzhou?" After exchanging a glance with me, Hongxiu immediately stepped forward. She spoke clearly and loudly, indeed. It was His Majesty who saved my young mistress. As for this young gentleman, I don't know why he fell into the water, but my kind-hearted young mistress, seeing him drenched, gave him an outer robe to cover himself. However, everyone present witnessed with their own eyes who truly saved my young mistress. This cannot be falsified. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, I was rescued by Gu Yuancheng. This is an indisputable fact. The imperial gold token in Song Qianghua's hand was used to find me a husband, which was also witnessed by everyone present. As for Gu Yuancheng, being the current emperor, his word was naturally as good as gold. At this very moment, both Song Qianghua and Gu Yuancheng's expressions changed dramatically, but I knew Gu Yuancheng loved her, so I didn't act immediately. Instead, I turned my gaze to Song Qianghua's face. As our eyes met, her expression suddenly turned furious. And she rushed over to strangle me. Shen Mingzhao, I know everything now. This must all be part of your scheme. Her words were sharp and deliberate, completely disregarding the many onlookers, and I let her keep her hands around my neck. Then I let this farce escalate further. In my previous life, I fell into the water and was rescued by Lin Yunzhou. Indeed, we had physical contact. Before revealing my family background, I could still conceal the matter somewhat, pretending it never happened. However, once Song Qianghua exposed it and everyone learned my name and family, I could no longer hide it. Thus, even if only to preserve my chastity, I had no choice but to marry him in tears. This time, the same logic applies. Song Qianghua personally escalated the matter. As the legitimate daughter of the Duke of Jinghua, I also needed an explanation. Suddenly, Gu Yuancheng, whose face had already darkened, rushed over in a swift motion and rescued me from Song Qianghua's grasp. He doesn't like me, but if I were truly killed by Qianghua Song, especially in full view of everyone, the combined outrage of the entire court's officials would drown him. In that case, Qianghua Song would surely die. Qianghua, that's enough, you're scolding me. Song Qianghua froze for a moment, her eyes quickly welling up with tears, looking utterly aggrieved. I didn't mean it that way, Gu Yuancheng tried to explain, but Song Qianghua shook off his arm. She then murmured to herself. You actually scolded me for another woman. She let out a bitter laugh, two clear streams of tears falling like rain. Just as Gu Yuancheng approached again, she raised her right hand and gave him a fierce push. Her nails were long, scratching Gu Yuancheng's cheek, causing beads of blood to roll to the ground. After all, he was the reigning emperor. Even if he was willing to humble himself before the one he loved, the dignity of the emperor could not be violated in front of so many eyes. Gu Yuancheng covered the wound on his face, his expression suddenly turning grim. He said sharply, how much longer are you going to make a scene? If it weren't for your stubborn insistence on arranging marriages for others, things wouldn't have come to this. I am the emperor, and my word is final. There's no room for discussion on this matter. Indeed, there was never any room for negotiation. After all, the entire court knew the emperor doted exclusively on the orphan from the previous dynasty. Even to the point of keeping the imperial harem empty. Now that this matter has arisen, it's only right and proper that they would surely plead for my official status. How could Gu Yuancheng not understand this principle? Yet Song Qianghua continued to make a scene, incessantly causing a disturbance. In moments of frustration, he could never suppress his aggrieved emotions, especially for an emperor, who could tolerate not the slightest bit of it. So he took a deep breath and then slowly walked up to me, his eyes still as cold and indifferent as ever, filled with wariness and scrutiny. I will naturally fulfill what I have spoken. You may return to your residence and wait. Thank you, Your Majesty. I respectfully performed a bow of gratitude, then turned to look at Song Qianghua. At this moment, she held the jade pendant in her hand, gazing sorrowfully at Gu Yuancheng. Truly a loving couple. Although I entered the palace, I only received the rank of Joey, but given my family background, this position is truly rather lowly. Even the palace I reside in is the poorest dwelling among the 6 eastern and western palaces. Moreover, for several days after entering the palace, Gu Yuancheng never once came to see me. It wasn't until the 7th day that I finally received a visit from Song Qianghua. Before the person arrives, the voice comes first. Even if you enter the palace, what can you do? The emperor doesn't like you and won't even see you once. Entering the palace just means you'll be left alone in your chambers. How pitiful indeed. As she spoke, the golden hairpins and dangling ornaments on her hair jingled, her entire body adorned with jewels and finery. No doubt she dressed this way deliberately to flaunt her wealth in front of me. She continued, look at this palace you live in. It hasn't been maintained for so long that it's fallen into such disrepair. But then again, it's more than enough for someone like you. Song Qianghua made no effort to conceal her malice. As the one who held the emperor's favor, Song Qianghua, though not officially a consort, enjoyed all the privileges and luxuries befitting an empress. That was why she dared to act so brazenly within the palace. However, in this vast imperial harem, there were still those she feared. This consort was unaware that a mere palace maid would dare show disrespect to consort Zhao. It seems the palace rules have not been properly learned. An extremely stern voice rang out from the main entrance. As the emperor's paternal aunt, the grand princess had taken care of Gu Yuancheng multiple times when he was young and she was still unmarried. Later, she helped Gu Yuancheng seize the throne and even took a knife for him, nearly losing her life. Therefore, Gu Yuancheng has always held great respect for this aunt. Because of this, Song Qianghua had no choice but to lower herself by 3 points in front of her. Hearing her voice, Song Qianghua's face instantly turned ugly, biting her lower lip tightly, yet she did not refute. The grand princess slowly walked up to me. She looked me up and down, then glanced at Song Qianghua, a mere female official, dressed even more splendidly than consort Zhao. Relying on the emperor's favor, how dare you be so lawless? Today, I had deliberately worn a plain silk dress with only a couple of hairpins in my bun. In stark contrast to Qianghua, they were polar opposites. The grand princess had always been concerned about the imperial lineage, wishing only for the emperor's harem to flourish with many descendants, yet Qianghua monopolized his favor, which greatly displeased her. However, she could not sway Gu Yuancheng's will. Now that I had finally been granted the title of consort, the grand princess, having just returned from Jiangnan, naturally rushed to the palace at the earliest opportunity. News of her arrival quickly reached Gu Yuancheng's ears. Torn between his most respected relative and the woman he loved most, he was naturally plagued with a headache. After court adjourned, he hurried over without delay. "Aunt, this is a matter of the imperial harem, let me handle it." Gu Yuancheng softened his voice to speak kindly. "Your Majesty, since this concerns the imperial harem, it should be resolved by the women of the harem. Currently, your harem consists only of consort Zhao, though Song Qianghua is someone you favor. Her status remains special. She is merely a palace official. One is a consort, the other an official, yet she dares to overstep her bounds. She has clearly learned nothing of the harem's rules. If consort Zhao is ineffective, am I not entitled to personally teach her a lesson?" The grand princess snorted coldly, raising a hand to trace the scar on her cheek, a mark of the sacrifices she had made for him in the past. For this, she was despised by her consort. And years of marriage turned into resentment overnight. The concubines in the inner chambers were all evidence of his betrayal, although in the end, the grand princess drew her sword and killed the consort. In Gu Yuancheng's heart, there was always a lingering sense of guilt. Thus, upon seeing that scar, Gu Yuancheng could no longer refute her words, but the eyes showed urgency, so I took the initiative to step forward, approached the grand princess, and said, "Your reprimand is justified. Aunt, from now on, I will certainly manage the inner court properly. As for today, Lady Song was merely joking with me. It was nothing serious, since I, the person involved, said there was no issue." The grand princess's indignation on my behalf was in vain. Therefore, Gu Yuancheng glanced back at me. His eyes, once filled with frost and wariness, now held a trace of concealed gratitude. As for the grand princess, she gave me a glance, her gaze calm. It wasn't necessarily that she liked me much, but she particularly disliked Song Qianghua, which had forced her into a temporary alliance with me. "Very well, if that's what you think. If I say any more, wouldn't it be my fault?" Just before leaving, she touched that scar again. Then, with a pitiful tone, she said, "The royal bloodline is thin. If your Majesty truly wishes for this aunt of yours to live a few more years, then bring more life to the harem. A little prince would be more effective than any miraculous medicine." These words were both a hint and a warning. That night, Gu Yuancheng stayed in my bedchamber. Song Qianghua was naturally displeased. However, since the grand princess wished to visit Qianghua Palace to burn incense and worship Buddha, and requested Song's company, she had no choice but to go. With every step, she looked back 3 times, her eyes brimming with tears. This sight pained Gu Yuancheng deeply. Inside the bedchamber, though we both sat upon the bed, the distance between us felt immeasurably vast, nor had I ever thought to force the matter. I even took the initiative to speak. "If Her Majesty inquires tomorrow, this humble consort shall say that the consummation with your Majesty has been fulfilled, ensuring no embarrassment for either your Majesty or Lady Song." I spoke first to show goodwill. presenting myself as understanding and considerate. No matter how much Gu Yuancheng wanted to find fault with me, but at this moment, he could say nothing and only nodded silently, then sent someone to fetch another book. Planning to spend the night like this, the candle burned out. Yet the night was only half over. Your Majesty, Lady Song is feeling slightly unwell. Please go and check on her. The maidservant by Song Qionghua's side knelt outside the hall, her voice filled with urgency. Upon hearing this, Gu Yuancheng immediately stood up and was about to rush out, but I grabbed his wrist first. Your Majesty must not. He turned around, his gaze heavy as it fell upon me. I immediately began to explain, the Grand Princess did not leave the palace tonight. If such a commotion were to occur, she would surely continue to trouble Lady Song tomorrow, and your Majesty might find yourself in a difficult position. Hearing this, his expression softened slightly as he asked, then what do you think should be done? Perhaps your Majesty could send medicine to Lady Song in my name, that way, even if the Grand Princess finds out tomorrow, she would have nothing to say about it, even if Gu Yuancheng would guard against me harming Song Qianghua. All I want is just a name. I never handle the medicine myself, it's all delivered by his trusted men. So naturally, nothing will go wrong. Thus, Gu Yuancheng nodded in agreement. After sending someone to deliver the medicine, he slowly sat back on the couch and began reading restlessly. But before long, Song Qionghua's side caused another commotion. Your Majesty, official Song is vomiting blood. At these words, Gu Yuancheng couldn't sit still for even a moment. He immediately dropped the ancient book in his hand and rushed out in great strides. I followed behind him to Song Qionghua's palace. According to the imperial physician, she had been poisoned, and it was extremely dangerous. She almost lost her life. Yet her makeup was impeccably done, fragile, yet beautiful. As soon as she saw Gu Yuancheng, she immediately threw herself into his arms and began to sob quietly. I don't know how I offended Consort Zhao, but she actually sent someone to deliver poison to me. While speaking, the Grand Princess, who had already retired for the night, suddenly appeared outside the hall and overheard these words. No one understood this better than Gu Yuancheng. That bowl of medicine, aside from calming the nerves and nourishing the body, has no side effects whatsoever, not to mention I never handled it, so the poison in the medicine is absolutely unrelated to me. And the hearts of those in the imperial harem are treacherous. Gu Yuancheng wasn't completely unaware either, so he knew better than anyone who had administered the poison. If the Grand Princess weren't present, he could feign ignorance and brush the matter aside. But at this moment, that was impossible. Poison, how dare someone poison in the imperial harem? Your Majesty, this matter must be thoroughly investigated. The Grand Princess immediately spoke up. Song Qianghua nodded, her gaze fixed intently on me. Yes, it must be thoroughly investigated. Gu Yuancheng's face darkened as he held the frail Song Qianghua in his arms, his tone tinged with reproach. You've been poisoned, you should rest first. After speaking, he turned to me. Consort Zhao, with the Empress's position currently vacant, you will temporarily oversee the affairs of the 6 palaces. If I didn't have this authority, the Grand Princess would surely intervene. At this moment, what Gu Yuancheng wanted was my goodwill gesture, and naturally, I would grant him this favor. With a smile, I nodded and said, this concubine will surely investigate this matter thoroughly and give Lady Song a proper explanation. With these words, the Grand Princess could say no more. She only glanced at me. She said, in that case, investigate thoroughly. With that, she turned and left. Seeing this, Song Qianghua immediately pointed at me and said, Your Majesty, she was the one who poisoned me. Why would you still let her oversee the imperial harem? She looked utterly aggrieved, as if wronged to the extreme. Had Gu Yuancheng not been absolutely certain that the bowl of medicine was not poisoned, he would have undoubtedly started punishing me without a second thought at this very moment, and Song Qianghua would surely have bribed people to testify against me. But just then, the Grand Princess intervened. Gu Yuancheng also knew full well that I had nothing to do with it. If we were to investigate thoroughly and accidentally expose his beloved Song Qianghua, the Grand Princess already dislikes her. If all the civil and military officials were to kneel in unison and threaten to dash themselves against the pillars, he wouldn't be afraid. But the officials are the foundation of the court. If they all dashed themselves against the pillars, his throne would become unstable. He loves beauty, but he loves the throne more. Because of this, as Song Qianghua had anticipated, Gu Yuancheng did turn against me, so she felt very wronged. That night, despite her illness, she drove Gu Yuancheng out of her bedchamber. As an emperor, he could show infinite tolerance towards the woman he loved, but this did not mean that, in front of outsiders, she could continuously undermine her own dignity. making the emperor lose face, so the two of them got into another argument. They argued fiercely, but this has nothing to do with me. After seeing off the grand princess, I immediately returned to my chamber to rest, knowing that I would have much to do later. As for Song Qianghua, who had always been cherished and pampered by Gu Yuancheng, when had she ever suffered such great humiliation? Thus, for several days in a row, she refused to see Gu Yuancheng again, while he, equally resentful, also avoided meeting her. Miss, with such a great opportunity, why don't we take the initiative to see His Majesty? Hongxiu offered me advice. I shook my head. There's no rush for now. Did you find the person I asked you to look for the other day? She nodded, whispered in my ear. The person has already been taken to the Guanju Palace. The Guanju Palace is Song Qianghua's residence, a clear sign of the emperor's favor. As for that person, he was my husband in my past life, Lin Yunzhou. In my previous life, because of Song Qianghua, I was forced to marry him. With my family's influence, I wouldn't have lived too poorly. But Lin Yunzhou and Song Qianghua unexpectedly hit it off at first sight. The two became very close, and Lin Yunzhou used Song Qianghua's influence to make my life miserable. So in this life, I personally sent her into the palace. I think this must be quite interesting. As I expected, the two indeed hit it off immediately. As for Lin Yunzhou, who had already been castrated, Song Qianghua felt deeply moved and sympathetic. As for Lin Yunzhou, originally a down-and-out scholar, if he wanted to climb up, he had to attach himself to someone of higher status. Song Hahua was now his best choice, so all sorts of flattery and fawning made her burst into laughter, and for a moment, the two of them unexpectedly became the closest of friends. Yet everything in the Guanju Palace was being watched. Therefore, I had rumors spread again, and within half a day, Gu Yuancheng kicked open the gates of the Guanju Palace. The one he loved refused to smile at him, only willing to laugh for another man, even if that man were castrated. As an emperor, as a normal man, his possessiveness still exploded, and he was furious beyond measure. The people sent out said that His Majesty was very angry and had Lin Yunzhou beaten just to make Song Qianghua yield, but she refused, even rushing forward to throw herself over Lin Yunzhou, in full view of everyone, with their bodies pressed together. His Majesty grew even angrier. Yet he couldn't bear to punish Song Qianghua, so he continued to have Lin Yunzhou tortured. In the end, Song Qianghua actually pulled out a golden hairpin from her bun and threatened His Majesty with death, enraging him so much that he turned and left the Guanju Palace, declaring that there were plenty of women in the world besides Song Qianghua, and since she wouldn't struggle, he saw no need to remain chaste for her. The moment Hongxiu's voice fell, the door of the bedchamber was kicked open, and Gu Yuancheng rushed in, panting heavily. Without a word, he directly carried me to the bed. Even though there were still several palace maids inside the bedchamber, Hongxiu quickly dismissed the attendants, and as she left, she cast me another glance. Clutching the sachet at my waist, I gave her an almost imperceptible nod. Gu Yuancheng's movements were rough, purely for venting. Soon, he fainted. The contents of the sachet could make him sleep for a long time and have a sweet dream. In dreams, there lies the ultimate joy. I kicked the person to the inner side of the bed and then got up. Hongxiu, who had been waiting by the door, immediately stepped inside. She pointed to the east wing. Miss, everything has been arranged. I nodded, then turned and walked into the east wing room. Pushing the door open, on the bed, the young man had rosy lips and pearly teeth, with delicate features. His eyes covered by a red silk cloth. As he knelt on the bed, I took off my outer robe and slowly climbed onto the bed. A night of pleasure. Everyone knows that I successfully gained favor last night. Even Gu Yuancheng, upon seeing the bruises on my body, failed to notice anything unusual and even showed a hint of apology. It was my recklessness last night. I smiled shyly, tacitly acknowledging it, but Gu Yuancheng's expression soon darkened again. For him, what happened last night was merely a momentary impulse. Now the entire harem knows, which means Song Qianghua must have heard as well. As expected, outside the bedchamber, Song Qianghua's maidservant was kneeling at the entrance, weeping and shouting, "Lady Song is going to jump from the tower." It was like a gust of wind. Gu Yuancheng immediately ran out of the bedchamber, not even properly dressed this time. I didn't follow him. My whole body ached, and I needed more rest. Hongxiu massaged my shoulders for me. Last night was a perfect opportunity. His Majesty was moved, and consummation was certain. Why did you have to take such a risky approach? She is my most trusted confidant. Without rebirth, she doesn't know of my hatred for Gu Yuancheng, a hatred as vast as the heavens. How could I possibly be willing to consummate the marriage with him? let alone bear a child whose blood carries the lineage of my enemy. But I need a child, and as long as this child has no connection to my enemy, it doesn't matter which man's it is. After all, it will still be my child. I didn't say much more. Hongxiu was a very sensible girl. After tucking me in with the brocade quilt, she immediately sent someone to investigate the situation regarding Gu Yuancheng and Song Qianghua. By the time I woke up at noon, she began to report. Song Qianghua climbed onto the city wall, threatening to jump, but she stood there for a long time, just crying. His Majesty rushed over and was utterly terrified when he saw the scene. Song Qianghua continued to cry, scolding the emperor for breaking his promise, for failing to give her the pledged one life, one love. Fearing she might truly jump, the emperor kept apologizing. In the end, Song Qianghua turned and threw herself into the emperor's arms. The two embraced for a long time atop the city wall, much to the amusement of the guards watching nearby. Thus, the two reconciled once again, but this time, I lowered my head and reached out to touch my belly. Want to make up? It's not that easy. 2 months later, news of my pregnancy spread throughout the court. All the civil and military officials in the court were delighted for me, because, at last, the empire had a successor. And since His Majesty had begun to favor women other than Song Qianghua, where there's a first, there's a second, but this matter brought me joy, and it brought joy to all the civil and military officials in the court. Gu Yuancheng secretly rejoiced. Only Qianghua Song was displeased. I heard that several sets of bowls and chopsticks were smashed again today, with threats to go on a hunger strike. As Hongxiu spoke these words, I was examining the phoenix robe I would wear in a few days. I was originally the daughter of the Duke of the State, born into a prominent family, and now that I am pregnant, I am more than qualified to become the queen of a nation. Not to mention the entire court of civil and military officials knelt down once again. If you don't make me queen, I'll crash into the pillar. A dense crowd of people lined up to crash into the pillars, and even though Gu Yuancheng was the emperor, sometimes he couldn't have his way, so he must make me the queen. As for this matter, Song Qianghua, who was already unhappy, became even more resentful. Don't worry, it won't last more than 2 days. Besides, Lin Yunzhou is with her. That man has a silver tongue and a bag of tricks. He can sweet-talk Song Qianghua into complete confusion. After their last argument, Lin Yunzhou was beaten dozens of times with a board and had to stay in bed for a full 2 months. Song Qianghua felt guilty and took care of me in many ways. Gu Yuancheng was originally very angry. However, since I was pregnant and he had to make me the empress, Song Qianghua was even angrier than him. As a result, Lin Yunzhou was temporarily forgotten. He's quite useful. Actually, he's my pawn to bring down Song Qianghua. As I spoke, I picked up a volume of storybooks beside me. The story went like this. A young master and lady, childhood sweethearts, were about to marry when the master's cousin appeared and intervened. The master's mother wished for him to marry his cousin instead. Torn between family loyalty and affection, the young master wavered, showing extra tenderness toward his cousin. Heartbroken, the young lady chose to leave. After her departure, the young master lost all appetite, finally realizing that she was the only one he truly loved, so he was willing to abandon everything just to be with her. In the end, the young lady forgave him, and the young master defied his entire family for her. The two lived happily ever after. Looking at the contents of the picture book, I couldn't help but find it amusing. How could someone so fickle and heartless ever be expected to possess genuine sincerity? Yet, ironically, such stories sell remarkably well. This implies that there are indeed people who believe in them, so I had someone deliver the script to the Guanju Palace, along with Lin Yunzhou, who was eager to take a shortcut to rapid success. These two together were bound to bring me an unexpected delight. Sure enough, on the day of the coronation ceremony, Song Qianghua personally poured a cup of wine for Gu Yuancheng and watched as he drank it, then leave. Together with Lin Yunzhou, they disguised themselves and fled the palace, while Gu Yuancheng then collapsed onto the dragon throne during the ceremony. The emperor was poisoned, shocking all civil and military officials. The palace immediately sealed off the news, both inside and outside, fearing it might cause public unrest. As for me, the newly appointed empress, virtuous and gentle, I stood vigil day and night by the unconscious emperor's side, unwavering, even to the extent of following ancient texts, cutting flesh to make medicine, all just to awaken the emperor. This act was deeply moving. So when Gu Yuancheng woke up and saw the blood-stained bandage wrapped around my arm, his eyes were filled with shock and emotion. I never expected you to go to such lengths for me. Your Majesty is the Son of Heaven, and your health is the foundation of the nation. even if it meant cutting all the flesh from my body. I would be willing if it could awaken your majesty. I spoke sincerely, watching as his eyes could hardly conceal his emotion. I immediately brought up Song Qianghua again. I have investigated and found that the reason your majesty was poisoned was because you drank a cup of wine before the coronation ceremony. The imperial physician also detected traces of poison in that wine. At this point, my eyes flickered slightly, still carrying a hint of hesitation. What's wrong? He pressed further. I immediately covered my face with a handkerchief and burst into tears. That poison was too potent. Although I cut my flesh to save your majesty, the imperial physician has diagnosed that you can never have children again. The reigning emperor, rendered heirless by another's hand. This is an utter disgrace, and the child in my womb will be his only hope, vicious woman. Gu Yuanqing violently overturned the medicine bowl beside him. His eyes burning with fury, he roared, "Guards, bring that poisonous woman back to me at once." Song Qianghua didn't run far at all, because she was waiting for Gu Yuanqing to come find her. Lin Yunzhou hadn't left her side either. You truly like her, but you really just want to use her to climb the social ladder. As long as the two of them go through this ordeal together, they will become close friends in the future. When Song Qianghua returns to the palace, he can leverage her influence to enjoy wealth and status. What a pity, Song Qianghua, the orphaned descendant of the previous dynasty's royal family, and the orphaned descendant of a rebel from the former dynasty, secretly recruited troops and horses, plotting to restore the old regime. This matter was just discovered by the wise and mighty emperor, who was utterly enraged. So when Song Qianghua and Lin Yunzhou were captured and brought back to the palace, Gu Yuancheng, who had just learned of the incident, was filled with rage. His eyes also carried a faint hint of killing intent. He loved beautiful women. But there was a condition to this. The realm stands firm. Loving a beauty is but a romantic affair. If it threatens the stability of the realm, even a beauty can become the bones of a beauty. Gu Yuancheng, even if you drag me back to the palace, I will never forgive you again. Still unaware of what had happened, Song Qianghua stiffened her neck and shouted at him. Right, she truly didn't know what had occurred. The matter of restoring the kingdom was actually a false accusation I fabricated. But who told her to poison the wine? No, the poison was also my doing. The original wine only contained harmless sedatives, but I later replaced it with poisoned wine. So Song Qianghua remained completely unaware. Her current behavior seemed almost like a provocation. Gu Yuancheng gave her a deep look, then turned to me and said, Empress, I leave her to you. After all, she was his beloved. Want her dead, but not by my own hand. This task can only trouble me. The Empress, as Song Qianghua was being dragged away, she kept muttering incessantly, why is it different? It was promised that once I left, he would regret and fear. Why is it different? Whatever a fool. Lin Yunzhou and Song Qianghua have both fallen into my hands. For Lin Yunzhou, from the very beginning, I had someone cover him with a sack, then cut off that part, and sent him into the palace to serve as my pawn. But this is far from enough. Compared to the harm he did to me, my little revenge is too insignificant. So then, I had him scrubbed clean, abandoned in a dilapidated temple on the outskirts of the city. There, it was a gathering place for beggars. A hell where dark desires mingled and intertwined with no outlet. Does gender really matter? It's not important. As long as that face is fair and clean, what does it matter if it's a man or a woman? Hundreds of beggars take turns. I think he must be very happy. Heaven. As for Song Qianghua, my first step was to ruin her face. After all, I didn't want her to die immediately, but to prevent Gu Yuancheng from regretting it, I made sure she was disfigured first, as expected, just as I was about to give birth. Gu Yuancheng indeed thought of Song Qianghua once again, even going to the dungeon with the intention of bringing her out. But upon seeing her face infested with maggots, Gu Yuancheng vomited on the spot. Song Qianghua knelt on the ground, screaming hoarsely, repeating every word of their initial vows, but Gu Yuancheng wouldn't stop. He only felt disgusted, kicked her away, and then scrambled out in a panic. I gave birth to a son and a daughter. It was an auspicious sign. The emperor was overjoyed and thus held a grand selection of concubines. I went to see Song Qianghua again. In the pitch-black dungeon, I kept her imprisoned for a full year. Yet even that wasn't enough. The suffering I endured, she must experience it too. That humiliating death, Lin Yunzhou endured it. Now, it's Song Qianghua's turn. 3 years later, Gu Yuancheng began to constantly miss Song Qianghua, who had long passed away, searching everywhere for a substitute. And the beauty I had prepared long ago coincidentally met him and became entangled with him. Then, let him fall ill. The emperor contracted a venereal disease, truly a scandal. Fortunately, the empire now has a successor, and I, as the queen, virtuous and gentle, in the emperor's final days, I took great care of him. Watching him lie on the bed, festering and infested with maggots, filled me with nothing but joy. You once oppressed me with your power. Did you ever imagine that all your power would one day be mine? Then, I held the dagger in my hand, stab after stab, I meticulously and slowly ended him. In the 7th year of Yuancheng, the emperor passed away, and the young emperor ascended the throne. The Empress Dowager held court from behind a screen. From then on, no one dared to insult me again.